Okay, so I am Kim Friends. I'm your state E-rate coordinator, and I'm gonna just kind of chill right here since we are in such a small group. And with me, I also have Beth McConnell, and many of you have received emails from Beth, and so you will continue to receive emails from Beth because she's a professional bugger. She's the one who will bug you about stuff out of the office and make sure that you don't miss your deadlines and that sort of thing.
Because we're never busy and forget things.
No, I know that never happens. And Beth's very, very organized. So yay, Beth. Okay, so today we are going to talk about E-rate and the E-rate 2.0 and the changes coming to the program that will be effective for fund year 2015. Here's sort of a loose agenda of what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about eligibility, the changes to the way your E-rate discounts are calculated. We're going to talk about the change from Priority 1 to Category 1 and those eligible services. We're going to talk Category 2 budgets and eligible services. We're going to talk somewhat about the application process and forms overview. We'll certainly talk about the application process, but unfortunately, we do not have finalized forms from OMB yet for either Form 470 or Form 471. The Form 470 is not that big of a deal that we don't have that one yet, but the Form 471, that we don't have that and I can't train on it today, I feel kind of crippled. So we'll go through what we can, but know that in January, those training sessions will be critical because those forms will be available by then and we'll all be sort of, it's a whole new world with these new forms. So, okay, so I know who is here today is just, we've got only LEAs here today. We don't have any charter schools. Are any of you not on the Tennessee E-rate listserv? I think all of you guys are. If you
that first part we did, so do we need to? I just realized it. Sorry.
No, I mean,
Okay.
I think it's okay. There wasn't anything that important
Nothing
yet,
first.
other than I'm Kim Friends, the Tennessee State E-rate coordinator, and this is Beth McConnell, who works in my office. So I think those were the two most important things that I've said so far.
Okay.
But they would have been able to see the
Yes,
slides.
they were
Okay,
all the slides.
good. So anyway, everybody here is on the Tennessee E-rate listserv. If you're not, those of you out in the who are watching this on the recording, if you're not on the Tennessee E-rate listserv, please send an email to either Beth or Brady. Their email addresses will be on the last slide of the presentation. Okay, we'll talk briefly about what is E-rate. E-rate is the education rate. It's a discount program that was authorized in the Telecommunications Act of 1996. Part of the Universal Service Program. There's actually 4 programs. There's high cost, which is called Connect America now, low income, which is actually called Link Up, rural health, and schools and libraries. So we're talking today about the Schools and Libraries Division of Universal Service. The program is $2.25 billion annually. That's been adjusted for inflation since 2010. So currently it's about $2.41 billion. The funding years are named for the year in which they begin. So though the funding years run like a fiscal year, they were referred to in E-rate speak as the first year of the fiscal period rather than the last year of the fiscal period as y'all do out in the LEAs. So fund year 2015 is fiscal year 15-16. The application process really should be beginning now. Today's training will give you some things to think about as far as eligible services go and sort of where do you want to head with your program in 15-16, and then you can start taking steps to get your E-rate applications going. The E-rate program provides discounts ranging from 20 to 90% on eligible services at eligible locations. As part of the new E-rate 2.0, the highest discount for Category 2 will be 85% rather than 90%. The fund is actually made up from charges on your phone bills. They are not taxes, they are surcharges. and it is not a grant program. The E-rate requires an annual application process. So who administers E-rate? The FCC actually makes the E-rate rules, the rules associated with the program. USAC, the Universal Service Administrative Company, was created by the FCC to run E-rate and the other universal service programs, and they also pay invoices across all 4 programs. The Schools and Libraries Division within Universal Service actually runs the E-rate program, administers the E-rate program on behalf of the FCC. They do not make policy decisions. They cannot make or change rules. They are simply processing the applications as submitted based on procedures and guidelines that are approved by the FCC. What is my role? So I am under contract, my office is under contract with the Tennessee Department of Education to serve as your state E-rate coordinator. And so obviously we provide outreach and training to all the LEAs in the state. We represent Tennessee before federal policymakers. What are you looking for? The presentation?
Mhm.
You didn't print it out?
No,
Oh,
I'm good.
I emailed it to you.
I'll share.
Okay.
Maybe we can make a copy of it. That would be good. So for those of you in the viewing audience, Ben Bedingfield
Hey,
did not print out his
oh,
presentation.
we usually have it.
I know.
Good.
Well, the reason I didn't, the reason it's not in the binders is because it wasn't ready when I had to go to print. And frankly, it's changed after every presentation. I've sort of refined it. So that was my theory. And that was why I didn't put it in there. And you're right, I do usually do that. So additionally, my office works as, we're a resource when the E-rate administrator can't help. I know many of you have called the Client Services Bureau over for various reasons because you have questions, and you know, they're kind of very vanilla in their answers. Well, I like to refer to us sometimes as sort of a translator service, and we can help translate E-rate language into plain English and help you answer questions that you might be having trouble understanding. Those of you in the room and in the viewing audience, if you've been around E-rate for any period of time, you got to know that it is not an easy or short process. Please read the listserv messages that come from either myself or Beth or Brady. We try to be very careful to not send out too much information because I don't want you to get to a point where you're just like, it's just another stupid emails from Kim. Doesn't mean anything. You know, if we're sending out a note to the listserv, it's typically because there's something important that you need to know. And stay organized. If you stay organized from the beginning, it really does make things a lot simpler, to the extent that it can be simpler. Here is the new E-rate 2.0 rule book. So this is what we're going to talk about today. Does that look good?
I'm going home.
That's what it looks like for real. We do have Beth to thank for that meme because Beth is very young and cool and hip, and I wouldn't know how to make a meme if my life depended on it. So thank you, Beth. I think this is hilarious, but I'm easily amused. Okay, so let's talk about what's changed sort of in broad terms with E-rate 2.0. The program has shifted its focus from a sort of broader focus of access, whether it's voice or video or data, to really focus on internet and broadband connectivity. There's a significant change to the way you calculate your discount. It's a lot easier. It's a lot easier to calculate your discount under the new program. Rural and urban designations have changed. We'll talk about it a little bit more going forward. And I know Brad and I have spoken about this because he sent me an email, because that's what you can do, is send me an email if you have a question. And he sent me an email about how down here in Lincoln County, most of his schools that were rural are considered urban under the new definition and designation of urban and rural. That is the case for most applicants in Tennessee, that this new definition really threw a wrench in things. However, in most cases, I think with only one or two exceptions, the change to the designation didn't ultimately change any applicants' E-rate discounts, because once you get to 80% discount, it doesn't matter whether you're urban or rural, you still get the same discount. However, there has been a huge uprising about how sort of inappropriate these new urban designations are. For example, have any of you ever seen the movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind? And they have that Devil's whatever, that square mountain out in Utah in Monument Valley. Under the new definition, that's an urban area. Yeah, they got more than 2,500 aliens living out there. That's all it takes now. So anyway, they're
illegal.
outer space.
Oh, okay.
Oh, God, man. But there has been multiple petitions for reconsideration filed by lots of agencies, including the State E-Rate Coordinators Alliance. Many states filed comments. We didn't file comments as Tennessee because it didn't, even though the changes, there were changes, it didn't really affect anybody's discount, but for just one or two districts. So, you know, we sort of made a decision to let other people fight that battle, and they're winning it. So that will get sorted out. There are some significant changes to eligible services. The new Form 471 undertakes an extensive data collection effort. The FCC needs to know more specifically about where the funding is going. What is it paying for? And in the past, while they've collected information on the item 21 attachments, there was very little, if any, sort of standardization of the data they were collecting in a specific format. So it was really not usable. So this is going to standardize that data collection and make it available for the FCC and other interested parties to download and review. Another new thing with E-Rate 2.0 is Category 2, formerly known as Priority 2, now has a funding cap. So you have a maximum amount of funding that you can be approved for over a 5-year period. And we'll talk more about that throughout the presentation. Invoice deadlines have become much more critical than they've been in the past. We'll talk about that some more throughout the program. And the document retention requirements have changed dramatically. So who is eligible? In Tennessee, public and private K-12 schools are eligible, though for-profit schools are not eligible, and pre-K is still not eligible in Tennessee. And there was no sort of blanket exception made by the FCC, which I was really pushing for and hoping for, to just sort of stop that whole pre-K thing. I mean, a student's a student. It's just crazy. Charter schools and charter school systems are eligible. Consortia comprised of eligible schools and or libraries are eligible. We do have several consortia throughout the state. There's the Metro Nashville Consortium and there's the Sweetwater Consortium, both with contracts that were awarded to ENA. We also have the state consortium off of the NetTN contract through AT&T. That consortium application is filed as a Form 471 is filed as a consortium application. The Metro Nashville and Sweetwater consortiums were formed for procurement only, and each member or user of those contracts signs their own contract and files their own Form 471.
Where do we stand on those at this point? No change as far as the Sweetwater situation goes?
Right. Good question. The answer is, I was in New Orleans in mid-October for a training, and I sat next to James Bachtel at lunch, and he's with the FCC, and his words to me were, I believe they are nearing or at resolution of the Sweetwater, because there's two different issues, remember.
Right.
The Sweetwater, for those of you who have been involved in the Sweetwater consortium and have not seen any approved funding for those funding requests. There was a protest filed on the competitive process associated with awarding the Sweetwater contract. The protest was filed by AT&T very publicly, and a complaint was made to USAC. USAC had to investigate it. It's taken an ungodly amount of time, but these things just do. And it's my understanding that they are approaching resolution. I don't know what the resolution is. I tried to get that. I'm like, okay, does that mean good resolution? And he goes, Kim, come on. And I'm like, okay, well, I just thought I'd ask. So.
What about the previous issue that led to the Sweetwater?
Right. So that's with the Metro Nashville and the timing of the LOAs, where USAC gave the go-ahead to those applicants who did not sign on originally to the Metro Nashville procurement because their Greenville City contract was not yet expired. And then they signed an LOA in the second year of the contract and filed their Form 471s at the direction of USAC. That was found to have been incorrect. USAC should not have counseled anyone to move forward in that manner with LOAs. And so we are still sitting at appeal or request for waiver status with the FCC. I believe that there's been some movement on it. I think I heard that ENA's attorneys have gone to DC to try to have further discussions about that. When I saw Lisa Hone in early October, who's the deputy chief of the Telecommunications Access Policy Division, she said, ENA has very smart lawyers. That's all I could get out of her. I don't know what that means. She's a lawyer herself, so I don't know if she's I don't know if that's good that they're very smart or if she thinks, I don't know. I just don't know. And I can't get anything out of them. But I'm checking in with them every couple months or so.
But in theory, we could still be on the hook for the full amount of our internet that year.
2 years, 3 years now. Yes, in theory.
Most of us the next year looked at a different solution. It should only be 1 year, right?
No, Metro Nashville's 1 year. Sweetwater,
Right. But those
two.
are two separate issues. Right?
Yes,
Okay.
right.
But the original issue that I was on should only be 1 year I would be liable for that particular issue. And then we did the new bid with Sweetwater, and we're still dependent on that one, correct?
Yeah, but it's 3 years worth of funding is tied up right now, right?
Yes,
Because it's
absolutely.
2012-13 for Metro Nashville, 13-14 and 14-15 for Sweetwater. Ostensibly, it's going to be 15-16 as well. The good news is that contract expires in 2016, so it'll have to be rebid this time next year. Is that right?
I believe so.
Or should it be being rebid right now?
I don't think so.
It expires in 2016.
Ooh.
Does it? Or 2017? I don't know. I'm going to have to check.
Yeah.
I'm getting off.
All right.
I'm getting off topic.
I'm sorry.
No, don't be sorry. There's still a mess with those contracts through no fault of anyone, really. It was just a miscommunication, it sounds like, from USAC to the field. Decisions were made based on direction that was given by USAC that was subsequently found by the FCC to have been policy decisions. And as I said earlier on, USAC cannot make policy decisions. And nobody sort of looked at it as a policy decision. They just looked at it as a procedural question. But unfortunately, this is sort of the dark side of E-rate, right? And this is just one of those things where y'all have been wrapped up in it. And I am hoping very much for a swift resolution sometime in the next 6 months or so. I think that's, no. I'd hope months, very much so. Okay, back to the slides. What is a NIF? A NIF is a non-instructional facility. It's important that you understand what NIFs are because there are changes to the eligibility for NIFs in the new E-rate 2.0. All the air just went out of Brad.
Yeah.
So non-instructional facilities are eligible for Category 1 funding. They are eligible for Category 2 funding only to the extent that an applicant may wish to place central equipment at a non-instructional facility because centralized equipment, because you have like your network operations center is in a non-instructional facility. The reason that non-instructional facilities are not eligible for Category 2 funding across the board is because they don't have students at them. So there's no way to establish a budget under this new program because the budget is established by student. We'll talk about it some more in a few minutes, in a little while. Maybe not a few minutes, but in a little while. You have a question?
No.
Okay, we're going to talk about discount calculations. So your E-rate discount is based on the percentage of students that are eligible for the National School Lunch Program. Eligible for the National School Lunch Program. I am very hopeful to have October NSLP data available for everyone to review by mid-January. You can see it says hopefully, because with the advent of CEP and implementation of CEP, which we're going to talk about in a moment as well, there's some challenges at the department as to who's sort of the keeper of the data will be and what is it going to look like and what format is it going to be in, and I'm kind of right in the middle of those discussions, so I will keep you apprised. Your E-rate discount is also predicated on the urban or rural location of your schools. The new E-rate program will simplify the discount calculations because every school or building in your school district will receive the same discount. So there'll be no more, I have two 90% schools and an 80% school and a 70% school and a 60% school. Everybody's going to have the same discount. And the way that that discount will be calculated in the new program is by taking the simple percentage of NSLP kids eligible across the entire district, and then that percentage will be applied to the E-rate matrix, the discount matrix, and that will be your discount. Just one discount. Every school gets the same one. The 2010 census data is being used for determining urban or rural status. We talked about how that's sort of in flux right now. It sounds as though, it looks as though the FCC is going to modify their definition and designation of rural population count. So that will change. However, for the purposes of today's discussion, it doesn't matter whether it changes or not. In order to have a rural discount for your entire district, you must have a majority of your schools considered rural. So if it's 50-50, like if you have 8 schools and 4 are urban and 4 are rural, you're an urban district.
Is it based on student population or is it based on building location?
Building location. And again, discount rates do not change based on which entities are receiving service. It's a same one discount for all. Here's a little bit more about the urban-rural definition. I don't really want to get too much into this right now because this is based on the current definition and it will be changing. We are very confident. I would say 98.64% confident that it's going to change. Currently, an urbanized area has 50,000 or more people in a densely settled core of census tract, and then urban clusters have at least 2,500 people, and the urban clusters are sort of outside of those urbanized areas. In Tennessee, it's the urban cluster inclusion in the definition of urban that has gotten everybody kind of in trouble. It's kind of caused a cluster, if you get my drift. I do have a list in tab 9 of your binder of the towns or cities that are considered urban under the new definition. So if you're not listed, then you would be considered rural, but this is just not a perfect, it's not a perfect system. So I just urge you to wait until the definition is clarified and recodified, because I think that it's going to fix most of the changes that occurred in Tennessee. Okay, here's a school district calculation example. So as you can see, in our colorful school district, we have 8 schools. We list the total enrollment for each school and the total number of students eligible for the National School Lunch Program. And we divide that number by the total enrollment, and we end up with a 27% NSLP eligibility. Pretty simple. Oh, and you can see here there's 8 schools, 4 are rural, 4 are urban. Therefore, this school district is considered urban because they do not have a majority of their schools rural. You got that, Ben? So we got 27% under urban. So we take that 27%, we go to the discount matrix. And in an urban location, 27% is between 20 and 34%, which equates to a 50% E-rate discount. So this district, every building in their district will receive a 50% E-rate discount. Oh, I wanted to make sure too that you understand, I didn't say this, but for purposes of urban and rural counts of buildings, you only use schools. Your non-instructional facilities, those addresses do not count in your count of urban or rural locations. Wanted to make sure that was clear.
Carve out pre-K.
Yeah, you're going to pull pre-K out of eligibility, certainly, because oftentimes those pre-K kids could artificially inflate your discount. But from a services received standpoint, you know, I think we can talk about how much, if any, that you need to pull out, depending on your circumstance. So if you have any questions about pre-K, let me know with pulling out
Did you say that if
services.
your town is not in this list, then it is rural?
It should be, yes.
Okay.
Are you not in the list?
Several of ours are not. We're from Franklin County, so like Cowan and Estill Springs and Huntland. are not-
Have you always been rural for E-rate purposes?
I believe so.
Okay, that's good.
Before it wasn't as big an issue. But
Right. Exactly. Okay, let's talk about community eligibility provision. How many of you know whether or not your school district has one or more schools participating in CEP? You have some too, Jody? No?
we do not.
We're looking at it. They have not jumped on it. I don't think we're quite at that level where we would.
I think you would have had to have decided by now for this school year.
We
Ben?
wide open gonna go with it, and then all of a sudden some stuff that information that they gather, they said, no, we're back away right now, we're gonna wait and see.
Wait a year.
How it works out with everybody
I think
else.
that's kind of where we are.
Okay, so with the exception of Diane, this won't necessarily apply to the other people in the room, but hopefully the people who are watching the video will have questions about CEP. So I am going to go ahead and explain how it's going to work from a calculating your discount perspective. So the community eligibility provision is a new alternative to the National School Lunch Program household applications for free and reduced price meals in what are considered high poverty LEAs. NSLP estimates are derived from existing data from other income-based programs instead of NSLP applications. So what that means is in all of your schools, oftentimes you have some percentage of the kids that are eligible for free lunch are eligible because they participate in another income-based program that would qualify them for National School Lunch automatically. So rather than going through the process of collecting applications at schools where you have a rather high percentage of your students directly certified, the USDA has come up with this program to allow you to circumvent having to send out applications to everybody and do all of that tracking and data entry. So that's what this is all about. The threshold at which a school is eligible to participate in this community eligibility provision is if you have at least 40% of your students are directly certified eligible for free lunch because they participate in another program. So that report comes from DHHS. And I believe, I don't know if it comes monthly or if it comes, I don't know how often it comes, but you have to have at least 40% of your students eligible to participate. You're not required to participate, even if you do have 40% of or more of your students eligible, you're not required to participate. If you don't have 40% of your students eligible in one school, but perhaps you have, 70% eligible in another school, you might be able to combine those two schools together to get that 40%. There's all different ways you can do it. It's rather complicated. And I am not the foremost CEP expert. I just kind of sound like I know what I'm talking about just because this is all I know is what's on this slide. So for E-rate purposes, since if you are participating in CEP, you can no longer collect national school lunch applications. And those students that are eligible because of direct certification may not be all of the students in the school that would be eligible if you were still collecting applications. So in order to sort of account for the fact that there are students outside of those directly certified students that may be eligible, the USDA has approved a multiplier that is used to derive your reimbursement percentage for the National School Lunch Program at that school or schools, and is also going to be used to derive the number of students eligible for E-rate purposes in lieu of collecting the National School Lunch applications.
So as long
Doesn't that sound like fun?
as you have your direct cert numbers, you put your 1.6 multiplier and you're good to go. Do you get the greater sub?
Well, actually, it's interesting. Jim Idle is in Orlando right now at the last USAC training, and he sent me a text a little while ago. It's one of the questions we had. CEP can only be used by schools that are participating in the CEP program. Right. So even if you're eligible to participate, but you're not participating, you can't use CEP. Right. The multiplier program. The multiplier.
You gotta do the math.
That's right. You'll do it just like you've always done it. I mean, if you're not participating in CEP, you'll just continue to use the National School Lunch, a combination of direct cert and National School Lunch data, as you always have. But if you're participating in CEP, there's a different way to calculate it. Yes, Diane?
And then it would be different from my first school and my other.
That's right. And this next slide is going to show you how it calculates. Ta-da! And this is kind of like your situation, Diane. So there's a group of schools in this district that are participating, and there are a couple schools that are not. So as you can see, it just meets the threshold of the 40% direct certification rate. We apply the 1.6, and we end up with a 64% NSLP rate. That's 40 times 1.6. We apply that percentage to the enrollment and get a total number of students eligible for NSLP, and that school is an urban school. We do the same thing for School B and School C. You can see with School C, the direct certification rate is so high that when you apply the 1.6, you end up with more than 100%. The most that you can claim is 100%. So you can see it just defaults to 100%. I think that once you get to, I think like 63% direct cert, then you're at 100% or just over 100% reimbursement. You can see School D and School E, neither of them met the 40% direct cert threshold. So they're not using the multiplier. So even though they have 38% of their kids in School D direct cert, there was another 4% that were eligible via application. So they have a 42% eligibility. This is just like how it's always been done. There's nothing different in this calculation. So and the same thing for School E. So you apply the NSLP rate to the enrollment, get a total number of students eligible for NSLP, which is 3,200. Divide that by 5,000. You come up with a district-wide Block 4 NSLP rate of 64%. We apply that single 64% to the matrix, and we end up with 80%, whether you're urban or rural. However, this is a rural district because 3 of their 5 schools are rural. Any questions at this point anyway? So note that there won't any longer be discounts that are like 76% or 82% or 87%. If you're either going to be 90, 80, 70, 60, 50, 25, 50, 40, 25, or 20. That's it. Unless you're a consortium, which none of you need to worry about that because that consortium discount is calculated differently. But so these are all going to be whole number discounts. So you're either going to be, 80, 90, 70, whatever the case may be. Unless it's C2, then the maximum discount is 85. So if you're a 90% C1 district, you're going to be an 85% C2 district. And we'll talk about what that sort of means in a bit. There are still alternative measures to NSLP available for you to use, such as a survey. The difference now is that the results from your survey can no longer be extrapolated across your entire enrollment. So it used to be that if you used a survey and say you had 100 kids in your school, you sent out 100 surveys, you got back 60 of them, which is more than 50%. And of the 60 that you got back, 80% of those were eligible. You could apply that 80% to the 100 of your total enrollment and be a 90% E-rate discount. So that extrapolation calculation can no longer be used if you're going to use a survey. So if you're going to use a survey, it's just like using a national school lunch application. You send out X number of surveys, however many you get back is, fine. Whatever that percentage of of the ones that you get back is your percentage of NSLP, period. So you don't get a little bump. People used to use the survey method to account for when they had, for example, very high poverty elementary schools feeding into secondary schools, middle schools, and high schools, and suddenly that poverty indicators dropped off significantly because those secondary school students want to have nothing to do with free lunch. So anyway, that process is gone now. Any questions about discount calculations?
If you send out applications, all you need is the applications to come back. Right? That say they want.
Send out applications, NSLP applications?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
That's why it is.
Right.
I mean, that's the way it is right now.
Right.
Right. And remember, NSLP eligibility is based on eligibility. It's not necessarily whether or not the student is using the program. So I don't know if that's helpful for you or not, but keep that in mind. The student only has to be eligible for free or reduced lunch in order to be considered eligible, right? All right, let's talk about internet access and broadband goals and the Category 1 eligible services. So the FCC made and I say this somewhat tongue-in-cheek, a significant change to the vernacular associated with the program by changing Priority 1 to Category 1 and Priority 2 to Category 2, and sort of doing but there really was a method to their madness. In their mind, there really are no longer funding priorities because they're setting money aside for Category 2. So Category 1 is Category 1, and it will be funded by the CAP. And that $2.4 billion that we talked about early on. Category 1 will be funded by the CAP if requests exceed the amount of the cap, then they'll use part of the set aside that they have earmarked currently for category 2 to cover that deficiency. I don't think that's going to happen this year if people file properly. Once we talk about the eligibility of mobile broadband services, I think that we'll have no problem staying under the cap, at least for this year. So there really are no longer priorities from a funding perspective. There's category 1 and there's category 2. Category 1 is telecommunications and internet access services. It's essentially all services, nothing that is purchased that you'll keep. And they're about the services that go to a building. Category 2, formerly called priority 2, is internal connections and basic maintenance of internal connections. There's also another category called managed internal broadband service that we'll talk about some more in a moment. That's a new acronym for you. It's MIBS. MIBS, Managed Internal Broadband Services. So it says here on the slide that funding remaining after category 1 funding has been committed is then committed to category 2 requests. That's not exactly the way that it's going to work. I mean, there is category 1 and then category 2 is set aside. They'll dip into category 2 to cover category 1 if they need to. I don't think they're going to need to this first year, but they may in subsequent years. The category 2 is essentially for services and equipment inside the building. So to bring that broadband access that you have coming to the building all the way to the classroom. So that's what category 2 will do for you. The FCC has adopted some internet connectivity goals, and they adopted the same goals that were recommended by CETA as part of the park and smarter balanced readiness standards. So internet access of at least 100 megabits per 1,000 students or users in the short term, and a gigabit of internet access per 1,000 users in the longer term. And they're talking about 2017-ish. I've heard 2017, I've heard 2019, I've heard 2020. So I'm going conservative and saying 2017-ish. The measurement will be at the district level for school districts and at the school level for schools that are not part of a district. These connectivity goals are established as goals. I am unaware, nor do I expect there to be any punitive damages or punitive actions taken against you if you do not meet or exceed these goals. But this is a benchmark that the FCC is using to make sure that one is providing the access that they're helping you pay for. Any questions? Wide area network broadband connectivity goals. This is a tough one. The goal in the long term is to have wide area network dedicated data service scalable to 10 gigs per 1,000 students in the long term. And again, I say 2017-ish because I don't know exactly when it's going to be because they keep throwing around different numbers. This sort of sub-bullet is important because this is an assumption that is being made by the FCC. I'm not opining on whether or not their assumption is right or wrong, but they assume that if you already have gigabit fiber, it's really no problem to just turn that on up to 10 gig. No problem. You guys have got all kinds of resources to do that.
That's why I'm paying close attention. You gotta work that into a budget.
That's correct.
All this stuff.
Oh,
That's
but
right.
you already got 10 gig, so wait,
That's between sections that ain't going out.
So, but this is something to just keep in mind, you know, as you're planning. This is for your information so that you can know where your head is. It's not something that has to be done tomorrow, but you know, you do want to, especially if you're going to be signing multi-year contracts for this kind of connectivity, you might want to make sure that you write into it that, you know, you need it scalable to 10 gig throughout the term of the contract. If it's a managed service, you know, that's something that your managed service provider needs to be made aware of so that they can accurately price the solution for you over multiple years. So again, category 1 focuses support on broadband to the building. It will be phasing down support for voice services. Boo. That's right. eliminates other Category 1 services and some Category 2 equipment. And the final eligible services list in your binder is a draft because at the time that this went to print, the ESL had not been adopted. It has since been adopted just a couple weeks ago on the 28th. Very little change from what's in your binder, but we will talk about the 2 specific changes that you need to be aware of. Okay, services no longer eligible under formerly known as Priority 1, now to be known as Category 1. Paging, web hosting, and hosted email, no longer eligible. It's a flash cut
So
as of 2015.
I've asked this question to ENA in particular, but email, it's part of that Metro National contract.
It's going to have to have a value assigned to it. It's going to have to be cost allocated out.
So are we going to have to probably go back and pay a certain sum, would you say?
I would think so. That'll be, ENA's going to have to.
My conversation with them was like, oh no, that was just part of the contract. We just offered that.
I don't think that that's correct.
Okay.
And
That's what I always heard, it's like a freeze.
well, you can't get anything for free.
That was my concern with it. And if I'm gonna have to pay for it, we'll go off of that because I'm not gonna pay for it.
Yeah, you can't get anything. Nothing can be for free in the E-rate program.
Part of the service, like you said.
So, districts might want to be looking at now that there's the Office 365 and the Google Apps and schools can get all.
There was a very spirited discussion about that at our West Tennessee training. And I know that you are all active members of TITA, and I would recommend that you, that's a very good resource for you to have those sort of, discussions on a broader scale. I am not technologically savvy at all. I can barely turn on my computer. So, I know there are other solutions available. I find it curious that ENA doesn't think that they need to cost allocate that. So I'll just touch base with them and see what they're thinking. Because they're usually pretty good about
And I may have
identifying.
understood that conversation, and I might not have been talking to an E-rate person, but
Yeah, I think probably I'll reach out to them because that sounds a little odd because they're usually really good about staying, pretty much on the straight and narrow. They don't deviate from it at all. So I will verify with them. But it's my understanding, the expectation is that if you have, and you'll see in a moment, that ineligible internet access components, email is listed specifically. So
It's not a phase out or nothing, it's just a,
it's a flash cut.
okay.
The other flash cuts are to certain telephone service components. These ones with the asterisk are currently under reconsideration by the FCC as being a flash cut, particularly because these charges, as many of you have probably discovered, are kind of buried in your phone bills. And for example, the DID charges, there's been a very strong and specific argument made that if you have a PSTN network phone system, you've got to have DIDs to make phone calls. Those are your phones. Those are your phone lines. And, they're really only like 10 cents a line or, 15 or 20 cents a line or something. And the amount of time that applicants will spend pulling these minute charges out of their phone bills and the amount of time that PIA will spend ostensibly making sure that you pull these minute charges out of your phone bills really is circumventing the purpose of the E-rate order, which is to streamline and simplify the program.
And I don't understand why they changed that, because in 3 to 4 years, it's gone anyway. Just leave it as it was. Why change it? Been doing this since 1996. I know you don't have an answer to it, but that's frustrating. It's
Rhetorical, Farley. No, I'm just kidding.
It's just frustrating that they
No, I agree
change
with
the
you.
rules when it's already phasing there.
Yeah, and they did make it, this particular decision, I will tell you too, was not mentioned as part of the notice of proposed rulemaking. This sort of just showed up in the order as an aside. And, you know, a lot of us have raised our hands and said, well, you know, if you would have brought this up in the NPRM, I think you would have gotten a lot of pushback from the start, you know, because they're like, well, nobody said anything about it. It's like, well, you didn't ask us about it. If you'd asked us, we'd have said that's probably not a good idea. Text messaging, however, is cut. They're not gonna.
How does that do, you know, because like you got your contract and it's all kind of bundled in together with your internet.
Your service provider will need to provide you a cost allocation. Yes, AT&T is working on it. Sprint is working on it. Verizon seems to be ignoring it, which is not atypical.
When are they supposed to have a decision made?
We hope that there's going to be a further order out by the end of December that will sort of, it's not going to really clarify anything. It's going to talk about some changes that were made since the changes that have been made. We are hoping that there's been a white paper circulated at the commission, which is typically what they do in advance of adopting an order, but we don't know what's in it.
So when will we know?
I think I hope to know by the end of December, but for sake of argument, you know, make sure that you're able to identify these charges within your phone bill. And then if you don't have to pull them out, then you just put them back in. But right now proceed as though, because I don't know that I don't have my 98.7%, you know, confidence like I do with the urban rural thing. I don't have that with this because I just haven't heard. So proceed as though they will be considered ineligible. And then if and when they're not, that'll just be a little bonus to you. So these services are no longer eligible. Wireless data plans, cellular and mobile broadband, will be subject to strict cost-effective scrutiny. And here's what it's going to look like. So essentially, in buildings with Wi-Fi access, under the FCC, in the FCC's mind, they're not going to pay for mobile broadband services to your tablets or your phones or your netbooks, iPads, MiFi devices. They're not going to pay for the service anymore. In buildings without Wi-Fi access, the FCC will consider funding these mobile broadband services if the applicant is able to demonstrate that mobile broadband services that you pay monthly for are the most cost-effective means to deliver internet access to those portable electronic devices in the school or in the classroom. We have been told the exact words is that the applicant will have a very heavy burden to bear when it comes to proving that $30 or $40 a month is more cost effective than installing a wireless local area network or wireless connectivity in your building to use the internet access you already have coming in.
So really, truthfully, if you provided supervisors, principals, and all these people phones, realistically, there's a good portion of that phone bill that's not on.
It's probably going to be about 50%. By the time for your phone bill, it's probably going to be about 50% when you factor that text messaging is no longer eligible. And essentially, unless you can meet these very, very stringent cost effectiveness criteria, then your data plans on your cell phones also will be subject to this flash cut of eligibility. It's going to be about 50%. I've heard that from AT&T and Sprint so far.
Your internet, and your emails, and text, and all that's gone away on your phone.
Well, I mean,
On your broadband.
it's gone away on your phones to the extent that the E-rate program will no longer provide discounts for it. But that's not to say that you're not still going to provide those.
We got to pay for it.
Right. And I want to make sure that I point out too, that the FCC is not saying that those services are ineligible, because they can't say that they're ineligible, those mobile broadband services, because they allow internet access to be delivered via other mediums, but they will make it so difficult for you to meet that standard of cost effectiveness that they effectively are ineligible, because they're just not going to provide discounts.
So,
Also red flag.
Say that again.
Will red flag you for a PIA review.
Well, if you are going to apply for discounts on these wireless data plans, I highly recommend you put them on a separate application, because you're not just going to get a PIA review, you're going to get a cost effectiveness review, which is much more involved than a PIA review.
Carve up some phone bills and go.
Yeah, I have not been able to find a district yet in Tennessee that has talked to me about this. I'm not the one making the decisions, but I have heard very clearly what they're looking for proof. And I don't know anybody in Tennessee that's going to be able to meet that burden of proof. Because if you remember, prior to this, those services were only eligible to the extent that they were accessing the internet from an eligible location. So anytime they went off school campus, either they went home or to a conference or on vacation or whatever it is those devices did, that part of the internet access service was not eligible. And you were required to cost allocate out some portion of it anyway for off-campus usage. So the FCC is saying, look, if you've got wireless connectivity inside your buildings, then these devices that connect wirelessly should just be connecting to your network that you already have running wirelessly.
Problem is though, it's
That
hard to
we
get
pay
a
for out of pocket.
smartphone or something that will access Wi-Fi that they will charge you data plan.
Right. I would agree with you on the smartphones. Sure. That I don't, yeah. You're kind of stuck with it. They require you to have the data plans. And, that is probably still a solution that you're going to continue to offer to those people who you think need to have that kind of service. But the E-rate program just will no longer provide discounts on that portion.
are school buses still considered off campus?
Yep.
So I don't, there's a neighboring school system in Alabama that I think is pulling it off and saying it is considered on campus.
Well, it's not.
And I would say they're gonna be under the gun this year if they get a nice review.
We're gonna have a hit fan.
Yeah, so
Yes. All of those issues that have cropped up over the years with the advent and allowable discounts on these mobile broadband services, it's just like anything. You give them an inch and they take a mile. And this is just Kim's opinion. I think that this change alone will remarkably reduce the demand on the fund from a Category 1 perspective. Remarkably. There are districts throughout this country that are applying for tens of millions of dollars a year in support for mobile broadband services for a number of reasons, mostly because they have never had access to Priority 2 money, so they've never really had any help to get them, wired in their schools. And they're rolling out these one-to-one initiatives and that sort of thing. And the E-rate program to date would pay for it. And so now they're kind of going to be between a rock and a hard place because they're not going to pay for it anymore unless, the burden of proof is not to prove that you don't have Wi-Fi. It's to tell me that how us paying tens of millions of dollars a year is cheaper than you installing a Wi-Fi network or a wireless local area network. For some applicants that are going to be in that situation. So for all intents and purposes, it is another hit to the budgets. That's right. It is. And this is all part of, this. I don't know how many of you watch Hunger Games, but I love Hunger Games. So I want to, when this window closes, we're going to have like a Mockingjay moment. And we are going to put all of this stuff together and we're going to write it down and we're going to show the FCC, this is what your changes have done. There's certainly some good, but there's a lot of moving the money around. It's the same money. This is robbing Peter to pay Paul.
And in Tennessee, frankly, we've already spent quite a bit of money on what they wanted. Couple fares well some of the other states because we've already invested heavily in a lot of the stuff.
I mean, we made pushes and pushes to get wireless, to get computers, to get everything up to snuff for online testing. We made all those moves. And
Yeah, but you still need more.
we've already spent, yeah, and I mean, we'll do that, but we need our phone bill money.
I understand. Right. I get it. So I have taken this on really as a project. And we are positioned well. I think Tennessee is a good cross section of urban and rural, big city, small town. You know, I think we represent a fairly average, we represent all contingents here in this state, I think really well. And it's small enough that it's contained. So we're going to be doing a lot of data gathering so that we can present it to the FCC because they have data and they firmly believe that their data is perfect and it's not flawed at all. And I can't say anything to that because I don't really know what they're looking at. And they believe that they're right. They truly do. So in their defense, they have crunched these numbers and this is what they feel is the right thing to do. And also in their defense, they have said, we're going to look at this over the next couple of years and see how it's actually playing out. So we're going to tell them. That's what we're going to do. Beginning in 2015, all voice services will begin to be phased out. And the way they're going to do that is not, again, by phasing out from eligibility standpoint, they're going to phase it out from a discount standpoint. So they're going to reduce funding for voice services by 20 percentage points each year until you have effectively a 0% E-rate discount. And that's how that works. This includes cellular voice, local and long distance, Centrex or PSTN switched phone service, POTS, PRIs, which are those circuits dedicated solely to voice, hosted voice over IP, and any circuit dedicated to voice service. So,
Boo,
yeah, boo hiss, boo hiss, boo hiss. Yes.
Boo to the power of percent.
Yeah. So, what that means is if, say, you're a 90% C1 discount district applicant, you will have no funding in 2019. So if you are less than a 90% E-rate discount, you're going to run out of funding before 2019. This first year, you know, it'll be reduced by 20%. The next year, it'll be reduced by 40%. I think next year is when it's really going to hit you guys. I'm not trying to minimize a 20% reduction, but if we don't stand up as a group with a very loud voice, this will not change. And I know that I've been saying, I know I sound like a broken record, but it's not going to change if we don't make a lot of noise about it.
So if I'm at 80%,
You're jumping ahead, Ben.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Stay on task. Stay on task.
This is a biggie.
Yes. Also, beginning in 2015, once again, there's nothing free in the E-rate program, and the FCC has gone back and rescinded their 2010 allowance that you could receive free or reduced price, particularly cell phones, because the cell phone companies made those offerings available to a much broader class of service users than just K-12. But there's that inch and a mile thing again. And there were service providers, particularly some voice over IP service providers throughout the country, who started bundling those very expensive voice over IP phones into their monthly cost. And the FCC is like, yeah, no, That's not going to work for us. So instead of just penalizing them, they penalized everyone. So once again, you're back to, if you get a free phone with signing a contract, or if you get a greatly reduced phone for signing a contract, either the cost of the phone or the difference in that reduction needs to be cost allocated from your funding request. And it can be cost allocated over multiple years. But
So what if you entered a contract last year and it's a 3-year contract? And you did get the reduced rate phone last year. How does that factor into this year? You're just still part of that contract.
yeah, but it's starting with funding for 2015. So if you get a reduced price or free phone as of July 1, 2015,
So if I take another phone,
yeah.
not my existing phone.
No,
I've
that's
already
correct.
got.
Right.
Okay,
They're-
that's what
yes,
I'm
that's correct. Right. So, yes, Ben.
For instance, Verizon will give you as many phones as you want, those little cheap quickies for your bus drivers or whoever you want. They just charge you per usage, per nickel a minute. So those we've already got.
You've already got them.
Okay, let's going forward.
Yeah, you've already got them, but then you want to go and get, an iPhone or like an iPhone 6, and they're going to give it to you for $300, and you know it's an $800 phone. That $500 is going to have to be accounted for, and you can spread it over, the life of the contract, whatever that is, but that has to be accounted for. So let's say, for example, I'm just going to do easy math. So let's say you have to account for that $500 over 2 years because you have a 2-year contract. That $500, the difference between the $300 you paid for that $800 phone. So starting with 2015, you would say your annual costs were $1,000 a year. You would reduce that by $250 that you apply for. So you would apply for discounts on $750 a year as opposed to the $1,000 a year to account for the reduced price phone.
So in other words, if you're gonna get a new phone, get it before July 1st.
Yes.
She's going, didn't really mention that, but yes.
I don't think everyone could hear that question.
Okay.
That's
And then
good
by the time,
because she talks quietly.
by the next time, it'll be obsolete anyway.
Ben, you're being Debbie Downer.
Well, okay, I'm pulling for you, Kim. I'm with
All
you.
right.
I'm in your corner. I'll write my letter when you send it. to
I
me.
know.
Yes.
I know you will. Okay, here you go, Ben. This is where you were jumping ahead. So this is sort of what the phase down looks like. I mean, this is pretty self-explanatory, but as you can see, you start with a lower discount. It obviously has a much bigger impact more quickly than, if you're up in the 80 or 90% range. Here's what it looks like with dollars, the same sort of thing. I don't think that I need to, y'all are pretty smart people. I don't think I need to read this slide to you. So that's what it'll look like unless we do something about it. But here's some good news. So these services are eligible at 100% of your discount. Yay. That's good news. So, I mean, I think you guys all know what that is, so I don't need to read it to you. So let's talk about internet access. So eligible internet access may include these features if they are provided as a standard component of a vendor's internet access service. And they list very specifically basic firewall protection, DNS, and DHCP. However, examples of items that are ineligible components of internet access are the following: applications filtering, content, email, and equipment, blah, blah, blah. So this is saying very clearly that if hosted email is part of your internet access service, it's ineligible, even if it's a component, which means you'll have to have a value assigned to that email component, and that will have to be deducted from your pre-discount cost for internet access.
And most internet providers are already saying some component, but to me, if you say, what's that, last year they said you were taking off $5 per month. If you come to this year and you still provide an email, that should really go up by something.
I would agree.
But they may say, well, it's inconsequential in the cost of the service we provide, but I would be nervous if it didn't go up at least a little bit.
I'm going to reach out to ENA and sort of see what their plan is, because like I said, I don't know who you spoke with over there, but it sounds like there may be a crossed communication line there. So,
We'll see. It's just a good question I asked before we
You know,
get
working
too
on Verizon too, to kind of break some of this stuff out, you know, state contracts and stuff.
on the Verizon cell phone stuff, Verizon Wireless is not coming to the table. I mean, I know that every state is trying to get Verizon corporate, Verizon Wireless Corp, and they're
You
just,
got more leverage than I do.
yeah. Well, I mean, but I can tell you AT&T and Sprint are both, they have basically come up with it, and it's like 50-50, on your smartphone plans. So 50% is voice and data, 50% data and text messaging, 50% is voice. So 50% of the cost of that smartphone service would be subject to the phase down of support. Yay. This is really no change from before. Installation of eligible Category 1 services are eligible for discount as long as they are installed by the same provider who is providing the service. And obviously, you must include installation on your application. Still ineligible is all this stuff over here. All this has always been ineligible. There's no change there. On-premise bundled managed, yes, Ben?
Going back, I was jumping ahead, now I'm gonna go back. Filter. Okay, I'm gonna pick up James Marshall's ball on that.
Okay,
We require the filter. Why are we not helped out a little bit with that?
that is a very good question. That
We're required.
it has
Unfunded
been brought to the table many times, about the eligibility of filtering, and it's just they're not biting on it because they're just not biting on it. And I have to believe that while filtering is required for SIPA compliance, and SIPA compliance is required for E-rate, filtering is not required for the effective transport of information to the classroom. And that's what the E-rate program's always been about. I may be putting words in the FCC's mouth right now, but just knowing what I know about how they think about eligible services.
If they require us to have that to be eligible, they should help us out. I mean, that's just a no-brainer to me. But anyway, go ahead.
I don't disagree with you, and many thousands of people agree with you. But I'm just playing devil's advocate, and from a thought process standpoint, the FCC says, yeah, you need to have it, just like you need to have, you need to have certain kinds of servers, but they're not going to pay for those. You need to have, I don't know, you need to have video cameras on the end of your video surveillance cabling. They're not going to pay for that. You need to have that stuff, but they're not going to pay for it.
Yeah, but it don't knock me out of requirement. It's not a requirement that I do to be eligible.
Well, you know what they'll say? You want access to this money, you better filter it, and we're not going to pay for it. So I'll just pretend like I'm the FCC. That's what they'll say. And I don't disagree with you, Ben. I'm not trying to be argumentative. I get it.
The other example, one reason I said that, the other examples are, we need this for different things in the school, but that's a requirement to be eligible for E-rate, but we ain't gonna pay for it.
Yeah, and so that's maybe one of the ways that they are determining your willingness to be compliant, to have access to the money. They're going to say, yeah, it's required, but we're not going to help you pay for it. You got to figure out a way to pay for that if you want all this other money. I know.
On the previous slide, there was a cost recovery fee. I don't know that I know what that is.
So a cost when a service provider is charged a fee, some sort of regulatory fee, and they recover that from the user. So it might not be called cost recovery fee. It may be called some sort of tax or some sort of surcharge recovery fee, like 911 tax recovery fee.
I've got
It's sort of
my stuff that says mileage charges. I didn't know if that
Mileage charges are eligible. That's part
Okay.
of the
service.
circuit.
That's the only thing that
Right.
caught in my mind was maybe that was a recovery fee. of some
Nope,
sort.
that's mileage from the CO to the building. So there is still eligibility available under Category 1 for managed services or eligible on-premise bundled services where you have, for example, internet access coming into your building and the service provider provides a router on the outside of your local area network to light that service, and then that router, then the switches on your network plug into that router, and then you distribute the internet access throughout your building. That is still eligible. But again, it's a single basic termination component that can be at each applicant site. We've heard, anytime there's changes to the program, there's people that want to jump into any loopholes they can find. We've heard a lot of people talking of late, oh, I shouldn't have moved that.
Oh, no, it's not.
Really?
Yeah, no, because it's showing off of it's just there for sale.
Okay.
Not working.
Okay, sorry. Sorry, viewing audience. What was I going to say? Oh, we have heard, so I'd like you to be cautious. I've told you this before, and I'll say it again. If it sounds too good to be true, it often is. So we have heard that there are service providers out there that are trying to square peg, round hole what would be considered a Category 2 managed internal broadband service into Category 1 under managed internet access by providing wireless access points throughout your building that they manage for you as part of your internet access offering. It is our understanding that that is not eligible as Category 1, that it will be eligible as Category 2, but under Category 1, the key is that there is a single basic termination component. If you have multiple access points throughout the building to switch that internet access that's being provided, then you are out of compliance with this requirement of a single basic termination component. So just be careful if you are approached. There's lots of service providers out there right now trolling for business, so just, again, if it sounds too good to be true, it often is. If you're not sure, send it to me. I'm happy to take a look at it, run it down for you. Is anybody here considering a dark fiber solution?
So discuss dark fiber. Exactly what is dark fiber for somebody that's
Okay, so it's fiber that's already in the ground that you can lease and light yourself. So you would lease the strands, access to the strands, and you would put the terminating equipment on the end of those strands to light it. So it's dark until you light it. If it is lit by a service provider, it is not dark fiber. It's managed fiber.
We say if it's dark, we don't want to hook to it.
Well,
We like lit up fire.
there's a lot there's a lot to a dark fiber network and managing that because you don't have somebody you can call if it goes down. You're it. Did that explanation make sense?
It does. And, there's several school systems, including ourselves, that has a local utility that has fiber that could possibly be lit up by us, and they might charge some fee to use that fiber.
Yeah, it's usually pretty low,
Yeah.
but I would tell you too, if any of you are considering with the utility company, it must be competitively bid. So the dark fiber connectivity must be competitively bid, just like if you were competitively bidding a lit fiber or managed fiber solution. So you got to post a Form 470 and you got to go jump through all those hoops regardless. This is just for review, community use of services. This was made permanent in 2010, that you can make your E-rate funded network, E-rate funded and filtered network available to the community after school hours or during non-school hours, whether it's on the weekend or whatever, and not be out of compliance with E-rate rules. You may not charge for use of that internet access because it is being provided to you at a discounted rate. And you can't order more internet access than what you would need for operating hours to cover the after operating hours needs. You are not, however, required to open your facilities, and the filtering must remain intact during use. And it does not allow you to share your bandwidth with other ineligible entities. It's still, all of that is still in play. Where I see this community use come to be most used, at least here in Tennessee, is in the football stadiums, particularly. I'm seeing a lot of wireless access from the campus that reaches the football stadium. And, you know, kids are getting on the network and, you know, they're out there at the football stadium after hours and giving, you know, anyway, that's where I see it happening a lot. I can remember last year or the year before, I had somebody call me who was in Manchester area during Bonnaroo, and they wanted to use the wireless access from a school for an emergency vehicle sort of command post that was, you know, out in the middle of a field in Bonnaroo. And that was not allowed because they were not on the school campus. Had they been on the school campus, it would have been allowed. So I just wanted to kind of point out where this might play. Yes, Diane.
If you have a BYOD network, it's okay, like the public comes in during the day and they connect to it.
That's kind of a tricky one because this community use is really for after hours or during non-school hours. That's really the only time that the community use waiver applies. So I don't know. I mean, if they're there for a bona fide reason associated with, you know, your running of the school, that may be different, but, you know,
Basketball games.
well, but that's after school. So you're fine. So yeah, you're fine after school. But during school, that's when you have to be careful about who you've sort of let onto your network. Any questions about internet broadband goals and category 1 eligibility? All right, let's take a quick little break before we, let me see what time it is. Okay, we're back to it. So now we're going to talk about category 2 eligible services, and then we're going to talk about category 2 budgets. So again, word change. Priority 2 is now called category 2. And category 2 is going to fund wireless local area networks and cable local area network building infrastructure and networking equipment. And that's basically it. It's really not going to be, it's a very condensed list of eligible products that are and services that are available in category 2. So as I said earlier on, the reason they changed the wording from priority to category is that the FCC, are targeting to put aside at least $1 billion in both fund year 2015 and fund year 2016 to make available for category 2 funding. If there's any money left over from category 1, they'll put that toward the category 2 in 2015 and in 2016. And of course, whatever, you know, other money they can find in the couch cushions, they will apply to category 2, that category 2 set aside. The intent is to also have at least $1 billion in funding years 2017, 18, and 19 as well. But that money has not yet been found. They are anticipating that the phase down of support for voice and the wireless broadband services and the elimination of funding for hosted email and web hosting will allow them to find that $1 billion for, well, it's actually $3 billion. It's $1 billion in each year, 17, 18, and 19. Should there not be, this is where it gets a little tricky. Should there not be enough funding available in category 2 to cover an entire discount band? The FCC does have a way to prioritize within that band who gets the money first. The way they're going to do that, because if you remember, there's only going to be for category 2, there's going to be an 85, 80, 70, 60, 50, 40, 25, and 20. And so the 80% band and the 85% band are going to be very, very big bands, especially the 80% band. A lot of applicants are going to fall in that band. So, you know, when it comes time to figuring out if they have enough money to fund particularly 80%, I see there being, and maybe when they do get to 70%, that's probably going to be 60%. I don't know. If there's not enough money to fund everybody who requested C2 money, the way they're going to prioritize it is by going into the band and prioritizing based on your actual percentage of NSLP. So, for example, let's talk about the 80% band.
I'm 53%.
Okay, you're a 53% actual, Brad. So you get an 80% E-rate discount. But the band for an 80% E-rate discount is 50% to 74, or actually 74.4. So Brad being at 53%, he's on the low end of the 80% band. So if they had to prioritize in the 80% band, Brad's going to be near the back of the line. Boo.
They're going to do it incrementally, not just carte blanche 80%. They're going to do 70.
Well, unless they have enough money to fund everybody who requests money at 80%, then they will break it down. But you'll still get your 80% discount, but they're going to prioritize it based on what your actual NSLP eligibility is
Incrementally.
within that band, right?
All right, so I'm going to ask the crystal ball here.
Okay.
First question is the 2 and 5 rule reset at this point?
Yes.
I know there's no 2 and 5.
Yes.
So, huge student, Los Angeles,
Yep.
Memphis, all these huge school districts, they get to start out everywhere.
They get to start out.
They get to start, guess what? My money go.
Okay, yes and no. Okay, so there's sort of two components to this new category 2 that will help mitigate some of that effect. The effect of the big boys coming back to the trough, you know, because 2 and 5 is gone. They've got, you know, high school populations. They've got, you know, they're usually probably going to be the 85% districts. Well, they're not going to be 90 because 85 is the biggest discount. It's the highest discount is 85, right?
But they do it incrementally. So
No, they won't. No. 85 is 85.
okay.
And in the 85% band is applicants with a district-wide actual NSLP percentage of 75% or higher. So they all get 85% at that point. They're not going, the FCC are not going to cut your discount. It's just if they don't have enough money to fund everybody at a particular band who asks for money.
They're just going to take it down as far as they fully fund it.
Right, underneath, within the discount band,
Right.
right? I don't see there being any problem with them at 85%, frankly. I think they're going to get to all the 85%ers that submit applications in 2015.
Okay, but 2015 for the 80%ers with a 53%,
I think it's probably,
I'm in year 2 more than likely.
yes,
In your crystal ball, you
Yeah.
would say
that's what I would say.
70, where do you think that cutoff? How much, do we have any statistics as to how many people are in that 75%?
I don't have any. No, I do
So
not have any.
Through the E-rate program,
I
we
mean-
don't know how many school districts really follow.
No,
that.
and we don't know, you know, how many are going to come to the table.
Because that's a lot of money to come up with.
Okay, well, but also understand that even the 85%ers or the big boys who have, historically had access to this money at 90% over the last, history of the program, they're only going to be able to come back and ask for the maximum amount of budget that's been allotted for them, right? So they don't have a blank check anymore. They can't just ask for as much money as,
Very true.
they want. So that will help with some of that, what would the word be? Distribution of funds, right? It should help spread it out a bit. It's not going to fix it completely by itself because unfortunately the $150 pre-discount just, isn't very much money in the grand scheme of things. But okay. And then they can only, as FCC chairman says, he expects that all schools and libraries will have access to Category 2 funding once every 5 years. But it's not a 1 in 5 rule because you can apply for the funding in multiple years. And we're going to talk about that.
Does it matter if you're urban or rural as far as priority within that band?
That is a very good question, Jody. So the question asked is, does it matter if you're urban or rural within that band, particularly at 80%, where it doesn't matter if you're urban or rural, you get the same discount? That's a very good question that I don't have an answer to, but I will check on that. Beth, will you write that down? Whether or not urban or rural in the 80% band matters in the prioritization of funding. So there is the reason that the FCC has moved to this model is to try to get Category 2 into some sort of a predictable pattern so that applicants can, with some degree of certainty, know when they're going to fund it. I don't know that they will achieve that with this model, but we shall see. This is the intent. The intent is to make Category 2 more predictable. Not all applicants will be funded in the year in which they apply. Okay, that's no different than it's been for the last, it's going on 18 years of the program. There is no provision to allow applicants to spend money now and apply for discounts. And then if you don't get approved in that first year, that you can reapply and, use a bear form for work that's already been completed. Unfortunately, we tried presenting that scenario to the FCC to say, look, these applicants need to know that they can get this work done now. They need to know that they're going to have support. Is there any way that you can look at it from this perspective? Do the work now, apply in the year in which you're doing it, but if you don't get approved, keep applying until you do, and you can still get reimbursed for that work. And they said no. So there is no provision for that at this time. The intent of the FCC is to connect students each year in fund years 2015 through fund year 2019. Here we are about the budgets. The way the budgets are going to work is each school building will be permitted to apply for a maximum pre-discount amount of $150 per student, or if you have a school with less than 62 students, that school would be eligible for the minimum $9,200 floor. And this will be on a rolling 5-year basis. Keywords in this calculation are pre-discount. So you'll take the $150 per student, and then you get your budget amount, and then you apply your E-rate discount to it, and that's the maximum amount you can apply for. And I'm going to show you those calculations in just a moment. Understand that the money or the funding is allocated by building, and it's not on a district-wide basis, which was another loss for us. We really wanted this to be a district-wide budget that you could spend wherever you felt it needed to be spent. That didn't fly. So the money is allocated by building, and you cannot move funding from one school to another. So that's rather unfortunate.
What about equipment?
That'll still be subject to the same location transfer and disposal rules that have always been in place. We will discuss that toward the end of the presentation. Funding may be requested over 5 years or applied for in a single year or applied for in 2 years, or however it is that you want to break up your projects. However, there are no multi-year applications. An application must be filed each year, and each year that application is subject to funding availability.
So I'm gonna be Debbie Downer here. If I don't think I'm gonna get it this year, why would I wanna go through the process of doing the category 2 this year, especially with how rapidly wireless is changing and the cost is changing? I don't wanna go through the bidding process, knowing I may not get it this year. I might be more apt to get it the second year, and at that point, the process could be different.
There's stuff out there.
Can you sign a multi-year contract for purchasing those kinds of products?
You probably could, but why would you want to? Because it changes so quickly. By the time you get into that second or third year, they're gonna come out with the latest, greatest, and you're already putting something in that's old. And if you don't have a mechanism built in to allow a newer model or something, which gets tricky,
Mhm.
built into a contract, I'm not gonna do it.
For in-networking APs and ICs out there, you know?
Right. Well, I can't argue with your logic.
But you would tell everybody to apply.
I would tell everyone to apply. I mean, you know, and the reason is because well, 2 reasons actually. Number one, the FCC, I think, again, they are looking at data and analyzing data that does not accurately reflect the amount of suppressed demand that is out there in the field for category 2 funding, formerly known as priority 2. Because as you well know, if you weren't 80% or 81% or higher, you pretty much have given up on applying for priority 2 money in the past, over the past several years. The FCC they don't understand that. They don't. How many in this room, how many of you in the last 5 years have received any P2 dollars? Okay, so we've got 4 people in the room, 0 people have received priority 2 dollars in the last 5 years. I can tell you in the other trainings that we've done throughout the state, it's been about 20%, which is about accurate with some data mining that I did several years ago that showed that 15% of the applicants in the country had received 100% of the priority 2 dollars available, which meant 85% of the applicants had received 0. And they've received 0 because either they've given up and they stopped applying, or it just never came down to their discount level. So, but I still, you know, and I'm not being unreasonable in saying, I encourage you to apply because we have no idea what this is going to do in this year. This is a completely unproven model. The only way to be sure you will not get approved is don't apply. If you don't have an application pending, you're definitely not going to get approved. And if we don't have a very high demand for category 2 in this first year and in the second year, the FCC is not going to feel compelled to make any changes to this budget amount or this process. So it's kind of, I understand that it's a lot of work to put together, you know, an RFP and specifications and do all of that. But in the grand scheme of things,
But this is where I think the FCC has hurt the average applicant here in Tennessee, in that I'm just not gonna have the budget dollars to fund the priority 2 because they took away my priority 1 funding.
mhm.
And so that demand's not gonna be there because I can't afford it even if I wanted to apply for it. I mean, so I'm afraid that demand's never gonna be there because so many of us are not gonna have the dollars to do it. So they have
Spending them dollars on
completely,
you,
yeah.
phone bills and everything.
So they have completely defeated the whole entire premise of get everybody access to category 2, in my opinion. I mean, it just,
Well, you're not
I
alone
don't-
in that opinion.
I just don't think I will, I don't even know if I'm gonna go through the hassle of applying. I've got so many other things to do. and I'm not gonna have the budget dollars for it anyway, so why mess with it?
We've run into that. I got stuff that I was approved for in the past, and I didn't have the money.
Mhm.
Once I carried it, run up the flagpole, I didn't have the budget to pay for them helping me, you know?
I
Just Debbie
understand.
Downer. I
No,
know.
no, that's okay. No, what you're saying, I mean, you're not alone in that thought. And you've articulated it very well. And I mean, I would love so much to have Dana Schaefer or John Wilkins sitting in this room right now to hear that from you, because I've been saying it for a year and a half now. And frankly, they're tired of listening to me. So that's why I after the window closes and while the window's open, as decisions are being made by all of you across the state, Beth and I are going to be collecting data from you. And I just can't tell you how important it is that when we ask for it, that you please just find some time to give us the data, because I want to present Tennessee as sort of the poster child of I don't want to be all about what's wrong. I mean, we can certainly talk about what's right, but we have to really clearly demonstrate what's wrong so that we can hopefully affect some change. Dana Schaefer, who is the assistant managing director in the office of the managing director, who answers directly essentially to Chairman Tom Wheeler, she's from Nashville. And she has she was Miss Tennessee, actually. She has a real soft spot for Tennessee. And I'm hoping that we can, I don't want to say capitalize on that, but I think if we can present some comprehensive data that makes sense, that's based on in reality, other than all of this conjecture, we can hopefully affect some change. And I may try to get all of y'all in one place at one time and invite Dana to come and talk to you, and you can talk to her.
I think you would get more folks show up if we really thought that had an effect on the FCC, to have the applicants that were truly going to be affected and their budget dollars. And I just hope everybody is truly aware that their budget dollars, and I don't know that people really are.
I saw, well, I don't know that before this round of trainings that everybody sort of really, the light kind of went on. I saw the light bulb go on for some people, but I still think this first year, the 20% hit, I don't think is going to be as painful as next year's 40% hit. I mean, that's cutting your funding in half. The monies that you've had available to you for your phone bills, that money in next year will be cut by 40%. That's a lot. Okay.
So I was interested to see how it's all gonna fall in place, because you're gonna have, how'd you say, people that are using, instead of running wiring and stuff, they're using broadband or Verizon or something.
Right.
Now, how did that change? Is that gonna go away, or what? Like say schools that don't have, they're not running wiring, they're just running Verizon or something.
Right. That's that mobile broadband stuff. I mean, it will be an extraordinary set of circumstances that will meet the cost effectiveness bright line that has been set by the FCC.
People are going to be pulling off of that. They're going to be looking at priority category 2s, putting in wiring, and then they're going to use category 1s to be getting the pipe to run it to.
Right.
I mean, then they're going to use category
Right,
2s
but
to
most
run
of those people are
They're
like,
going to start pulling off that and now to see how all that points comes off. I just wonder how's all of it.
eventually, yes, but because most of the people who are using, frankly, most of the applicants who are using mobile broadband data to supplement their one-to-one initiatives and to bring internet access to the student on that portable electronic device are those applicants with very low E-rate discounts, very low, like 40, 50%. Where they have not had a snowball's chance in to get priority 2. And, they're probably 3 years out minimum on getting access to priority 2, even with this set aside. So they're going to, you want to talk about the hit they're going to take. But what it will do is it is going to reduce demand on the fund from a category 1 perspective greatly. And that money can then be put into category 2 to be made available in fund year 2015 and fund year 2016. So when we say there's at least $1 billion, that's the minimum. I would anticipate 1.5 easily being available for
No way-
category
No
2.
way they go retroactive. I mean, they can't go on and put their stuff in and keep applying and say, now your
No,
time's up.
in
We're gonna-
fact,
now we're back up 2 or 3 years to pay for that.
This second bullet here where it says there is no provision to allow applicants to spend funds now and be reimbursed in a later year. And that's on slide 43. And that is unfortunate. Okay, so let's get back to the slides on slide 45. Talking more about category 2 funding budgets. If an applicant requests less than the maximum budget available for a building in a single year, they may request the remaining balance in the subsequent funding years of a 5-year cycle. All competitive bidding requirements will continue to apply, and applicants can still only apply for what you need. After this first 2 years, which the FCC publicly call a pilot program with this new budget amount and this process, the per pupil, per building formula will be reviewed. And interestingly, it will sunset unless the FCC takes specific action to extend it. So that's interesting, instead of it being the other way around. So the FCC has to take deliberate action to extend this funding formula cap budget process after 2 years. Otherwise, we just go back to what we had before, or some,
It's kind
you know.
of ambiguous, isn't it, what they'll go to?
Huh?
Does it say what they'll go to, or is it just kind of?
No, it's just,
Hanging, ain't you?
right. I mean, you know, if you listen to the FCC, I've been to a couple of the USAC trainings, and the FCC has been present at all of them, which has been wonderful, just to get some clarity, because again, USAC can't make the rules. They can only administer the program. The FCC does make the rules, and they can interpret their rules. So it's been helpful to have them around. When this question has come up, and it's come up in every training I've been to about the 2 years and the 5 years, and there's only 2 years of funding really identified, but it's a 5-year program, and how weird is that? You know, and then they talk about this taking action to extend it, you know, without coming out and saying so. We're, you know, the FCC's in a roundabout way saying, we can't see us not extending this. But it may look different. I mean, they may add money. Maybe they'll increase the cap. Maybe they'll change, you know, what the per pupil amount is.
They left that door open to be able to adjust it,
That's correct.
basically.
That's correct.
What they've done.
Right. And don't think that they've left the door open to do this for 2 years and have you guys jump through all these hoops and then, you know, pull the plug on it. I don't see that happening. But I do see it morphing and sort of, as you said, adjusting. Okay, here's a budget example. So as you can see, we'll use a Red Elementary School. We've got an enrollment of 185 students. So we multiply $150 per student by the 185, and we come up with $27,750. If you recall earlier in the presentation, our colorful school district had a 50% E-rate discount. So we apply the 50% E-rate discount to the school budget cap, and the maximum amount that Red Elementary School can receive in E-rate funding over a 5-year period is $13,875. So that's how it works. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. When I asked in the last presentations that we've done, if you have an enrollment of 185 students, we'll just do easy math, and let's figure you have 10 classrooms and administrative areas. So maybe 8 classrooms and 2 offices. So that would allow you essentially $1,387.50 per classroom or administrative area of the school to install wireless access points, you know, install Cat6 cable or whatever it is you do. I start to sound like I know what I'm talking about, but I don't. You know, any switches that you might need, any controllers that you might need, all of that's how much you'll have.
So are they going to allow you to put wire classrooms for desktops? You know, before priority 2 was rewiring an entire building, including drops in the classroom. Do you have some liberty what you do?
Yes, yes.
Or is it strictly for wireless?
No, you can do a wired local area network or wireless or some combination thereof. Good question. So, you know, this is sort of what it looks like. So this school district that had 5,200 students, I think we figured before, it will be entitled over 5 years to $434,650. They can spend that all in 1 year. They can spend it in 2 years. They can break it up over 5 years. But again, it's by school. So they can't, you know, like they've got their big high schools, you know, maybe they don't need all that money at their high schools, but they need more money at, say, Brown Elementary School, because they're only going to get the $4,600. They can't move money from the high school to the Brown Elementary School.
But the E-rate discount rate is considered over the whole district.
That's correct.
Applies to each individual school.
That's
not
correct.
What their E-rate for that school is.
That's correct.
District-wide, okay.
Right. Every school, every building gets the same discount. So let's talk about non-instructional facilities and category 2. So essentially, non-instructional facilities are not eligible to purchase equipment for category 2 unless the non-instructional facility has classrooms and those classrooms are recognized by the state as a school. So a non-instructional facility doesn't have students, therefore there's no way to establish a budget for that building. So that's why they're not eligible for funding. However, they are eligible, non-instructional facilities or network operation centers are eligible to receive centralized equipment to be located there. But since the non-instructional facility does not have a budget, you have to use budget from each school that equipment will be supporting to purchase that equipment. So, and at the central office, if that equipment is also supporting the central office, that a portion of that equipment would have to be cost allocated out as ineligible.
I thought there was something simpler about this.
I
Where do you do that?
would agree with you. So let me just do some easy math again, because my brain is really full. Let's say you have 10 schools and you buy a centralized wireless controller that costs $10,000. And you're going to put it at the non-instructional facility. And because I'm going to do very easy math, it does not support anything at the non-instructional facility, this controller. It only supports your 10 schools. So you can do what's a budget allocation, either a straight line allocation and take $1,000 from each school. You could do it by the number of students at each location and take a commensurate amount from each location based on how many students they have. Or you could come up with some other cost allocation or budget allocation criteria that uses tangible criteria that reaches a realistic result. So the new Form 471 will give you some options. It'll give you a straight line cost allocation option or a per student cost allocation option or other. So you've got some flexibility. It's whatever works best for you.
So if you've got a school that's got 50 access points, another one's got 10, you can do it based on the number of access points.
Sure you can. Sure you can. Whatever tangible criteria you want to use that reaches a realistic result will be fine.
How does it figure in the cost allocation if you've got some, if you're using part of that at the net, does it figure that for you also?
No, it does not. You have to
So
figure
how
that.
do you show that, I guess?
Okay, so you would show it on your item 21 that I won't be able to show you today because it's not yet available, but we will have a very intensive training in January about it. But as you did in the past with your item 21, when there was something ineligible, you would indicate, X is ineligible, on your item 21. So
So if you
we'll
bought
go
a
through that.
switch and it's at the central office, and everything's going out there. But you got like another 10, let's just say 10 computers at the central office. How do you carve them out based on the whole scheme of things? You got all these other.
Well, you have to use tangible criteria that reaches a realistic result. So if you've got 10 computers and you're on a 48 port switch, figure out how much it is per port and pull off the 10. That's one way to do it.
Ooh, this is just ain't fun.
No,
Well,
it's
really
not.
That's not really realistic because that gives you a bigger percentage.
Okay, well, I'm just, hey,
If you go
hey,
to the train.
don't
station,
shoot the
that's looking
messenger,
up
Ben.
1,000 computers down here off of one port.
I'm just saying, I don't know. You have to use tangible criteria that reaches a realistic result. If what I just suggested to you isn't, because, and it's entirely possible that it's not, because I really don't know.
That sounds good.
But, you know, I'm just,
Well, this is a prime example where we're at today. This is a non-instructional facility. My data center is set right through that door right there. So my wireless controller would reside in there. I probably have 5 access points in this building and 60 at my high school. So
Right.
I could probably come up with some kind of
Yep.
formula that way. But my switches in there get a whole lot more complicated because it feeds the entire school, but it also, that's where all my internet comes in
Its
and
ports
everything.
may be here, but you may have one transceiver that's feeding the
Yeah.
whole school.
So people really
Right,
want to
coming
have
out
to
of one
consider how their data centers are designed when it gets to this point and try to figure out a way to.
That's right. And just the, you know, you could write it up on, you know, a piece of paper and stick it up right ahead of you. Use tangible criteria that reaches a realistic result. That's precisely the language that USAC uses and that the FCC actually uses in their rules. And it can be anything as long as it's realistic.
But this just applies to category 2. right?
That's correct. This is only for category 2, except for a cost allocation of ineligible components of internet access, for example, in category 1. Again, it has to be tangible criteria that reaches a realistic result. I don't think that 0 is going to be realistic. Huh?
You got that down. You've said that before.
I know. I'm going to have it tattooed on my arm.
They'll change it in there if we stuck.
So anyway, so that's kind of where we're at. So, you know, this category 2 budget thing, it's this is unproven territory at this point. We, you know, there are theories about how it's going to work, and
Another one of them deals. We ain't gonna tell you how to do it, but tell you if you done it wrong.
right, kind of.
That's a good way of putting it.
That's how it
Yeah.
sounds all the time.
So let's talk about new schools in category 2. So you can apply for category 2 funding for your new schools if you know that you're building one. And so if you're going to estimate the number of students who will be attending the new school, that's fine. You can seek funding based on that estimate. However, if you overestimate the numbers of students that actually attend the school, you will have to return the difference in funding by the end of the next funding year. That being said, if you apply for C2 funding, if I go back to here and say you apply for the C2 funding at Red Elementary School and you had an enrollment of 185, and the next year your enrollment is 285, you can apply for funding for the additional 100 students that you get over that period. Conversely, if Red Elementary School, you apply for funding at 185 students and the next year you have only 150 students, you do not have to return that funding because Red Elementary School was already an established school. So the estimate sort of penalty only counts for new schools. Am I going the wrong way? Yeah, sorry. Okay. So does that sort of make sense? Okay. Now, students who attend multiple schools throughout a school day, such as those that attend vocational schools part-time, may be counted in both schools. You can't count pre-K even once, but you can count some of your students twice. We like to call those kids the $300 kids.
How do you, if they were to audit you on that, how do you prove that?
And I've asked that question a couple of times.
Documentation you need.
So it's my understanding that vocational schools or, you know, adult high schools, you know, when students are attending both or whatever, that they have attendance sheets and enrollment sheets. And typically those kids are there maybe only either part of the school day or part of the school year, but they're still registered with their home school, right? So you would just take a snapshot or an enrollment sheet from a day in order to establish those kids. Because remember, you don't have to worry about doing the snapshot for discount calculations anymore for those, you know, non-traditional eligible schools like vocational schools, because it's going to get the same discount as your whole district. So that's easier. That makes it easier, right?
But now some enterprise and school district will go, hey, I'm gonna bus my kids halfway across town for part of the day, and we're gonna get $300 per kid,
Pre-discount.
I could
free
have,
discount.
I could
But
have my kids go across the breezeway. That'd be too much trouble.
but you know, somebody, I mean, unfortunately, somebody probably will take use of that. But
Yeah, well, I'm just reporting the rules.
Alternative school, that they might be there a month or
Right.
a year, so we count them.
Yeah, you count them in both their home school and in the alternative school. And to establish the enrollment for the alternative school, you would take a snapshot or use enrollment sheets, like daily. I don't know if you have that daily or weekly enrollment or monthly or something.
So it would be just like on that specific day, you would have 10 students there, say, where the day before you might have had 15.
Yeah, so pick a day.
But you can't count over the whole year, say you had 30 over the whole year.
No, because it's a number of bodies that establishes the budget. So, especially because if the 30 kids are there all year, but there's really only 10 at a time, you only need to have connectivity for 10 students at a time.
Okay, gotcha.
I'm gonna point out the obvious.
Okay.
But
I was hoping you would.
you're obligated to pay the non-discounted portion, right?
Yeah.
Still, just like always. I mean, it's not like you're getting, hey, I'm getting $120 per student. I don't have to come up with other.
Oh, no, you still, yeah, right.
I mean,
It's pre-discount. It's, I'm being rather facetious to call them $300 kids.
Right.
It's just,
$240.
well, they're $240 kids for you 80%ers. And they're $250 kids for the 90%ers. Does that sound right?
Yeah.
No, they're $270 kids for the 90%ers.
85%.
Oh, no, they are 250. Yeah, that's what it is. Because I know it's $127.50 per kid at 85%. So that's $255. $255. Oh, I'm gonna stop doing math. See, that's why it has to be easy.
So if you're a 50% school, you're gonna have to fund 50% and they will fund 50%.
That's correct.
In your example, somebody would have come up with $434,000. I'd have had a heart attack if that come up that much.
Oh, man, y'all can, y'all got one.
Okay. So category 2, ineligible items. Everything on here is correct except for the antennas. Antennas are ineligible only to the extent that they constitute crossing a public right-of-way. So if your antennas are external antennas that bleed over into the neighborhood or whatever, they would not be eligible for discount. But internal local area network wireless access antennas are eligible as long as the signal stays on
I'm
campus.
just trying to
It's
cover a
eligible.
gymnasium with
Right.
external antennas. I can't make it strong enough to try to feed the community.
That's right.
As long as I'm just trying to feed something in my facility,
Yes, sir.
it's good.
That is correct. Please also note that all servers except caching are ineligible, including DNS and DHCP servers. Only caching servers will be eligible. So no more email servers, no more DNS, DHCP, Active Directory.
Did we have a lot of
Terminal.
districts that- in Tennessee? did
Not in
people do
Tennessee.
servers?
No, but I've seen a lot of it.
Really?
Mhm. And note also that VoIP or voice telephone components for category 2 are no longer eligible. So they're not going to pay for you to buy a new phone system. Permanently eligible items, however, are all of these, including new caching servers. This is a big announcement. That's what it sounds like. Also, cloud-based functionality of any of this equipment or virtualization of any of this equipment is eligible. Clearly, that was, that's I think the FCC and USAC have been moving toward that, but they couldn't really get their heads around it. But it is permanently eligible until it's not. But currently it is. Permanently, impermanently, permanently, temporarily eligible. What? Go back?
All right, like Arrowhive, I have to pay like a license every 5 years. And with that license comes support.
That
So
sounds like it would be
it's
maintenance.
cloud-based controller. They don't call controllers, but they're the Hive manager.
So that sounds like it might be managed internal broadband services, MIBS. We're going to talk about it in a second.
Okay, but see, the wireless,
We're going to talk about it right now.
okay, let's go.
Managed internal broadband services, MIBS. I like that, MIBS. This is eligible in 2015 and 2016, which cover the operation, management, or monitoring of a LAN or wireless local area network.
But it resides in the cloud.
Okay, I don't think that matters because you're paying a fee, right, for that management of those.
That's what you push out your
Controllers.
updates and all that,
Right.
configs and all that.
So the
But
only,
also part of,
what,
there's a support that's tied to that. When you buy that license, it comes with support.
like maintenance?
If you need support, you need to call,
Software upgrade.
you need to call Haji, which they're pretty well married, but if you get the call,
What did he just say?
I don't know where he got that.
I don't know what that was about.
if I have to call support, and I get the support comes with that license. With that license you get.
So I guess what,
It comes with updates, upgrades, plus you can call support.
so they don't actually, are they managing your network or are you managing your network?
He logs in and makes the changes.
We make all our own changes and we do all that, but the controller is in the cloud. And
His wireless will not work, well, I won't say it won't work, but
it'll
if
work.
he makes an update to his controller, he does it in the cloud, and it comes back down and updates all his access
Says like
points.
his controller resides here, mine resides in the cloud. It pushes all the updates, it pushes everything from the cloud.
Which is where most things run.
And I would say that would probably, to make sense, if it pays for his own pay for mine, but the part I wondered is support comes with that. For each AP, you have to pay a license for that after, like, my time's coming up like in 5 years or so, and it's about to run out. I'll have to re-up that to be able to work off the cloud. Now, my APs will still function, but I can't upgrade.
That sounds like that's maintenance. That's what that sounds like to me. Like that would be covered under maintenance. Basic maintenance. So basic tech support, configuration changes. Basic maintenance has always been eligible for funding. That what you're describing sounds like basic maintenance to me. And I think it would be eligible, but you're going to have to bid it out. You're going to have to post a Form 470, and you're going to have to bid out that support.
But
You're going to have to bid it out. And we'll talk about RFPs and evaluation matrices in a little bit, but
I mean, it's gotta be me.
well,
Nobody
okay.
else is playing.
Stop talking.
Oh.
So we'll talk about that in just a little bit. So it can be eligible, but as in all things E-rate, it must be on a Form 470 at some point. Costs associated with either of the service categories identified above are still subject to the maximum pre-discount $150 or the maximum discounted budget available per school over a 5-year period. And again, unless the FCC extends eligibility, these items, MIBS and basic maintenance, will sunset from an eligibility standpoint as of 2017. What's important about that is that if you apply for and receive funding in either 2015 and or 2016, and the FCC decides to sunset the eligibility of MIBS or basic maintenance, but you've entered into a multi-year contract in good faith, you know, expecting this to be available for 5 years, you would still be eligible for the remainder of your funding over the rest of that period. So it's sort of like you're grandfathered in, if as long as you receive funding in 15 and or 16. Also eligible, blah, 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 blah. That's all the same. What's new, but it isn't really new, but clarified, is that installation and configuration are eligible under category 2, and they do not have to be, those services do not have to be provided by the same vendor providing the equipment. That's been clarified as part of the ESL. So we're very excited about that. As it has been for a number of years now, when you're seeking bids, descriptions must be non-manufacturer specific. For example, descriptions may state Cisco 2811 switch or compatible or equal or equivalent or blah, blah, blah. But you can't just say, I'm only going to contemplate a Cisco 2811. Eligible equipment, this is new with the new order. Eligible equipment may be purchased and or installed on or after April 1st prior to the beginning of the funding year. That has never been allowed before. It's very helpful for those applicants who are applying for C2 funding using, for example, bond money. They know they have to do the project regardless. They want to go ahead and get it done. And if they get their E-rate funding, then that's great. They'll get reimbursed for it. So this, allowing this to start as early as April 1st does allow applicants the maximum amount of time to complete the work, particularly over the summer. When most schools get out in, you know, May or early June, you can get started right away instead of having to wait till July 1st. Disbursements, however, will not be made until on or after July 1st. Invoicing cannot take place prior to July 1st. So that's kind of the gotcha to it. No more technology plans required for E-rate purposes. Yay me.
You're broken hearted. I just see it in your eyes.
That was like one of those things. But this does not mean that you don't need a technology plan. It does not mean that you shouldn't have a technology plan. This just means that it is not required for E-rate purposes. I know that Eric Brown and his group are working on whether, you know, what's sort of going to happen in Tennessee with the technology plan requirement. I wouldn't expect anything to happen before next year. Any questions about that? Is your head ready to explode yet? Are you getting hungry?
Getting there. Yeah.
Okay, well, I think you still have like an hour,
Great.
right?
What time do they go?
Oh, I'm
Oh,
gonna
there
get
we
it.
go. Because it's 11:30.
It is 11:30 now.
It'll be ready at 11:45, and it'll only take like 5 minutes.
Oh, okay, good girl.
So I don't want to sit in assembly.
All right, as soon as she gets here, as soon as she gets back, we'll break. We'll be done. We'll be ready to break. Okay, so now that I've sort of given you the high points of the changes, now we're going to talk a bit about the application process itself. So here's a sort of overview. First form is Form 470, where you bid your services, then you evaluate your responses, sign contracts, request E-rate funding via Form 471, go through review, which is Program Integrity Assurance, PIA, receive your funding commitment decision letter, your FCDL, turn on your funding and certify to SIPA compliance using Form 486, receive the services, and then get your money. So as you can see, all 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 things have to happen before you can receive your money. So it's not, you don't stop at step number 5, which is receive your FCDL. You've still got 3 more very important steps after that to actually receive the funding that's been approved for you. Let's begin. We're not going to go through posting a Form 470 because it's really no different. In fact, it's different than it was last year right now, because the 2015 Form 470 isn't even available yet. So The purpose of the Form 470 is to essentially open the competitive bidding process. It identifies and describes the types of equipment and quantities of service and that you need. It notifies potential bidders that you are seeking proposals. RFPs may be used to describe specific needs and circumstances, but they are not required for E-rate purposes. However, from a local or state procurement perspective, depending on what kind of work it is that you are looking for proposals on and how much you think it's going to cost, there may be local or state procurement guidelines that you must adhere to in addition to filing a Form 470. If you're going to use an RFP or some other kind of document to further describe the services you're requesting on Form 470, you will have to make that, you should make that document or documents available at the same time you post your Form 470, because either your Form 470 or your RFP have to be out for 28 days, either or. Whichever one goes out later is when your 28 days start. So if you post your Form 470 and don't have your RFP ready till 5 days later, your 28 days don't start until 5 days after you post your Form 470, or vice versa. Must be available for 28 days. Descriptions, again, cannot be manufacturer specific. You must allow and evaluate equal or allegedly equal responses. Disqualification factors must be listed in item 13 or in your RFP if you're using one. And if you want E-rate discounts, Ben, you have to have the thing on a Form 470 first at some point. See that last one? Service or equipment must have been posted on a Form 470 at some point. So if you haven't ever done that before, you'll have to do that now for your cloud-based whatcha-jigger. We'll talk about it at lunch. So posting the Form 470, that will be filed by the entity that will be negotiating with the vendors. You will file it online using the Apply Online section of USAC's website. All Form 470s are posted on the Schools and Libraries Division website for vendors to view. Understand that as soon as you hit submit, that starts your clock ticking, your 28 days. As soon as you hit submit, the Form 470 is publicly available for vendors to view, or anyone to view. I get asked this question often: what is the deadline for the Form 470? There is no deadline that is established for the Form 470 formally. But it is, it must be posted online for at least, I say 29 days. It's got to be at least 28 days, which is, I would use 30 days, frankly, before the Form 471 window close. For example, if the Form 471 window is closing on March 18th, you would have to have your Form 470 posted no later than February 18th. I can't tell you how important it is that you do not wait this long, especially this year. I know that I say this every year, but this year particularly, USAC is going live with a brand new platform on which the brand new Form 470 and Form 471 are being launched. Everything goes live really at once. Think Obamacare website. Do not allow yourselves to, I don't anticipate that happening, but that would be worst case scenario, of course. Do everything you can to get your Form 470s posted as soon as humanly possible. Might not be possible by Thanksgiving, considering today's the 11th. I don't know, that's still 2 weeks. You got all kinds of time.
I will be in Vegas. I will not be posting.
That's right, you will be visiting.
Sorry,
But
there's no paper forms for 470 this time.
no paper forms will be accepted for Form 470 or Form 471 in fund year 2015.
So how do people?
Oh, you need a key.
And this may be jumping ahead, but
Oh, do you need the card?
No, it's paid for.
Oh, good.
Well, the Justin will get
Okay.
you can file it.
Yeah, the new Form 470 is not available.
so
Yeah.
to get a new pen, if I'm a new guy taking over E-rate this year, usually you have to file a paper form first, and then they would get you a pen and all that
Right,
stuff.
well, okay, so paper certification and paper form are two different
There we go.
things.
Gotcha.
Right,
Okay.
so you can still file paper certifications this upcoming year, but not paper forms. I don't know many people who file paper forms anymore, at least in Tennessee. I think everybody's doing it online, so that's good. So anyway, as I said, just do everything in your power to get your Form 470 posted as soon as possible so that you have time to go through your processes and be ready to post your Form 471 very early on in the window.
What is that the actual date, March?
No, that's not the date. We don't know what the date is. We anticipate that the window will open in, I think, early January. I say January 7th. And it will close no later than, we've been told, March 31st. So. Same, basically. It's the same, except that it's all new. It's the same, except it's completely different. It's exactly the same, but completely different. Okay, so when must you post a Form 470? You must post a Form 470 every year unless you've signed a multi-year contract. So if you have month-to-month services, for example, for your phone services, a lot of Tennessee applicants have those rural co-op phone companies that are, I don't know, they just don't have contracts. It's wild. I have never heard of such a thing. But so you must post a Form 470 every year. You must do that even if there's no competition in your area. I mean, you still have to post a Form 470 every year unless you have a contract, period. Bidding via E-rate, just posting a Form 470 does not exempt you from any state or local bidding rules or laws that may apply, but everything can be done simultaneously. Most of the time, the 28-day minimum on Form 470 far exceeds the minimum amount of time that an RFP or other procurement would have to be posted if E-rate weren't involved. So as long as you keep it out for at least 28 days, you should be okay on that. You don't have to file multiple Form 470s. You can file a single one. You can file 2. You can file 50. It doesn't, I mean, it's up to you. There's no right or wrong way. Just remember, every form you file will have its own set of dates associated with it. So you'll be tracking more forms the more you file.
Can you recommend, I mean, would you recommend a single 470?
I would at a minimum recommend a single Form 470 for any C1 services that you might need, and then any C2 services that you might need. But if you're ready to go on all of it, you can post it all at one time on the same Form 470. There's no penalty for it at all.
And you just take multiple RFPs if you have
Yep,
an RFP
and
for this
send them to your website or wherever it is that you have them posted. Absolutely.
You do have to do that like on your phone.
So I wanted to talk briefly about this. I don't think this will apply to, and I know it won't apply to anybody in this room, but it may apply to somebody who's watching this recording because there may be some charter schools that might be able to work through this. If you are in a situation where you can purchase commercially available broadband internet access packages that cost less than $300 per month per building, you may be able to just purchase that without having to post a Form 470 at all. The caveat is, it must be less than $300 per month per building. And the minimum speed must be 100 megabits downstream and at least 10 megs upstream. And the annual cost of no more than $3,600 per building must include all equipment and installation charges and monthly recurring charges. So you don't have to post a Form 470 if you can purchase something like this that is commercially available. Like particularly, I think the cable companies have offerings like this available for like business class internet service. Nobody in this room is gonna apply. We'll check it out. Then you don't have to post a Form 470. Be sure to tell everyone at your district involved with procurement that they can't sign contracts for E-rate eligible services without first posting a Form 470. This gets its own slide because it's so important that you have conversations with people, particularly this time of year, that if it's remotely related to phones or internet or technology, that they should be talking to you. So the competitive bidding process, after you posted the Form 470, vendors submit bids. Proposals must be accepted for a minimum of 28 calendar days, but you can extend that. You can always make it longer. Vendors will contact you if they need additional information. When you are contacted by a vendor, you must indicate your willingness to receive a proposal listed for services listed on a Form 470. Don't just say that you're going to stay with vendor. You can't say that. You are allowed to do all of these things in the first section. I don't think I need to read them to you. You are not allowed to have a relationship with service providers that would unfairly influence the outcome of the competition. You are not allowed to violate the gift rules. I'm not going to go through the gift rules in detail. We've done that many, many times. They haven't changed. So I just don't feel that it's necessary to go through all of that again. You are not required to meet with any vendor during or after the Form 470 bidding period. You are not required to respond to generic or spam emails such as, I saw your Form 470, please call me to discuss your needs. That's not legit. I mean, if they are going to ask you a specific legitimate question about what you've posted, either on your Form 470 or as part of your RFP, then you are required to respond to that. But something like this, you would not be required to respond to. The other thing you're not required to respond to is if a service provider contacts you and says, please tell me your internet access needs, and you haven't even requested internet access on your Form 470. Frankly, I love to respond to people like this. This is one of my favorite games. So if you want to send those to me, I'm happy to respond for you.
What if you put on your 470, we do every year, our county requires that we do a sealed bid. So all responses have to go in a sealed envelope to our finance office, and then we do a bid opening. I put that in the 470 every year, and every year I get bids emailed to me.
Do you do just a Form 470 or do you do an RFP also?
Most of the time it's just a 470. But we get, I'll get bids emailed to me, and so then I respond to them saying, I can't accept this bid, you will have to do in a sealed envelope as per 470, blah, blah, blah.
Are you even,
I get multiple of those.
or I get some of that too, and sometimes they don't follow rules, they don't.
Well, that
follow
just
all
has
the
to be a
criteria.
disqualification.
It would be a disqualification
So
factor.
Am I required to reply to them when
No.
they send that? Okay, that was my question.
You are not. If you have indicated on your Form 470 in that item 13 that you will only accept responses in sealed envelopes to this address by this date and this time, and then they send you something via email, I would keep the email and indicate, in your records that they were disqualified for that reason.
They'll usually, you'll put it in, like, I guess, it's gotta be in a sealed envelope. But if you got any questions, respond to the email, and that kind of leaves you like, well, am I obligated to talk, since I didn't send it in a sealed envelope, am I required to?
I think it's only if it has to say it explicitly, explicitly state in. It's curious that you're not doing an RFP or something else if you are requiring sealed responses, because a sealed bid is different than sealed responses.
It would be like with our web hosting, for instance. That's, we do a 470 for web hosting. And that's where we would receive.
How much do you pay in web hosting every year, roughly?
How much do we pay? I think it was like $7,800.
Oh, so it was under 10,000. Yeah. So I can see, where that, okay. That makes sense to me.
So, and then we get bids emailed to us.
Yeah, no, if you want to be courteous, you can let them know. Too bad, so sad. Sorry you can't read, but you're not required to. But I would suggest that if you have instances of that in the future, and even in the past, if you haven't done this and you can still do it, print out those emails, and just keep it in your records as disqualified because they did not follow the submission instructions. I would recommend that.
You might worry about that this next year.
Yeah, it's gonna cut out a lot.
Yeah, for web hosting, right.
Right.
Exactly. That's kind of, yeah. But as a general process question, that's a very good question. Because I wanted to let you know that when you, as I said, when you submit your Form 470, you press that submit button. It's available for vendors to download all your contact information, and that, you know, they have like bots out there doing that, and they'll just send out random emails. You know, they don't have any way to really comprehensively review your Form 470. You're not required to respond to inquiries that are not specific.
But it is key to document that and put it in.
Yes,
the file.
document it. Document, everything's about documentation. So yeah, you don't have to respond to them. You know, if you want to be nice, you can let them know. Sorry you put all this work into this thing. You didn't read the instructions, but you don't even have to do that. But for E-rate documentation records, I would keep copies of even bids that are disqualified. Service providers cannot do any of these things. And they too cannot provide gifts to applicants that violate the gift restrictions. So both service providers and applicants are required to follow the gift rules. However, service providers can answer general questions about the products and services they sell in response to applicant inquiries for, you know, maybe in advance of a, you going out to bid, you need to do some market research and find out what's out there. They're allowed to do that. But again, you just can't provide one vendor any inside information, or that would, you know, provide one vendor more information than another. They can and should provide information to you to help you respond to USAC questions regarding their application. And they can and should provide assistance with service substitutions and other post-commitment activities. So on Form 470, you file it using the Apply Online section of USAC's website. This is what it looks like now. I have no idea what it's going to look like in January, but this is what it looks like. And again, as soon as you post your Form 470, it is available for you to view as well as others. Interesting data on that Form 470 that you should verify. The posting date, make sure once you've submitted that it actually shows up in a search, because it should show up immediately. The earliest date that your contracts can be signed and thus your Form 471 submitted, that's called the allowable contract date, or ACD. And if the Form 470 has been certified, it will have a date that the Form 470 certification was received, whether it's electronic or by paper. I also get a lot of questions about what is the deadline to certify my Form 470? And that deadline is by the time the Form 471 window closes. However, I would not recommend waiting. Just file your Form 470, submit it, and certify it. Just, you know, don't wait around on any of these forms. You know, you get one form, it means you got to do something else. So just do that other thing right away, so that, because I know you're busy and I know it's very easy, it'll get away from you. Questions about Form 470 competitive bidding or gift rules or service provider and applicant roles? No? Okay. Here's the bid evaluation. After the Form 470 is posted for at least 28 days, then you must review all the bids that have been received for the services. Jim's so funny. You want to make sure that you keep documentation of the criteria and process used to select your vendor. Keep all winning and losing bids. I would also add to that list disqualified bids. Keep the bid evaluation matrix and retain all correspondence between you and the vendors, both winning and losing, throughout the process. At all times, price of the eligible services and equipment must be the most heavily weighted factor during bid evaluation. It cannot be equally weighted the same as something else. It must be the single most heavily weighted criteria in any evaluation that you undertake. Be sure to develop your evaluation matrix and criteria before opening the bids. So don't open the bids, take a look at them, and then decide what you're going to evaluate on. That's not compliant.
Does that component need to be part of the 470 / RFP? Does it need to be clearly stated?
Well, ideally, yes. the FCC rules do not require that it be stated up front, but your local guidelines may. And that's what you have to follow. When in doubt, follow the stricter of the rules. Applicants can consider other criteria besides price in the bid. And here's some examples of criteria that you can use to evaluate the proposals that are submitted. You'll note that the cost of ineligible items can be considered in your evaluation matrix, but it cannot be weighted equal to or have more heavily than the price of the eligible goods and services. You, again, cannot consider free services. There's nothing free in the E-rate program. We got nothing free, nothing, zero. Everything that is free has a value, and a value must be assigned to it. Here's a bid evaluation matrix sample. As you can see, the price of the eligible goods and services have the most heavily weighted criteria for 30 points. Vendor 3 won this process, but you'll also note that they did not have the lowest price. They had the second lowest price. Vendor 2 had the lowest price because they received the full 30 points. But using other criteria, Vendor 3 came out on top. You can use whatever criteria you want as long as price of the eligible goods and services is the single most heavily weighted criteria. That's another one of those things that you want to go back to your office and write it down and stick it on the thing right above your head.
She's seen that a lot too.
I know, right? I did.
Tattooed on the dog.
I'm going to tattoo that too.
That
So
might be right.
what happens if you receive no bids? You should document that as well. If you did not receive any bids and you have an existing service provider, for example, for those of you who are in the more rural areas with some of those ILECs and co-ops that provide your service, sometimes they just don't realize they need to be responding. So you can use your existing services as sort of a bid response. However, that being said, if you receive a response to your Form 470 and it is not your existing provider and you've only received the one bid, you might want to document that and maybe you can either use your existing costs as a response or you can reach out and ask your service provider to respond so that you have something to compare to. Just because you only receive one bid does not necessarily mean that that bid is cost effective. So be prepared if you received only one bid and select that vendor to be able to demonstrate that you've done whatever market research you need to do to determine that the bid response that was submitted is in fact cost effective. Vendor selection must be done before you submit Form 471. Be careful not to make any decisions or sign anything or file any forms during at least the 28-day waiting period. Contracts must be signed and dated by the applicant unless you're receiving services on a tariff or month-to-month basis. This is a complicated bullet that you cannot select two vendors to provide the same service. In 2009, there was a decision from the FCC called the Macomb decision, where Macomb, it was a school district, I think in New York. Doesn't really matter where they were, but I think they were there. They decided to go out to bid for T1 service. You can tell this was old. I think they went out to bid in like 2003 or 2004. And then their discounts were denied because they selected two vendors to provide the same service without clearly identifying different users, So they ended up with two providers providing T1 service. The FCC decided that two service providers cannot be equally cost effective. One must be more cost effective than the other. And because they were serving the same population, their funding was denied. And then it was also denied on appeal. So, go ahead.
I got a question then.
Yep.
So they've been pushing us to expand broadband, use more broadband services. Some of us have jumped on and done voice over IP. But you've got all your eggs in the basket for one internet service provider as far as the ingress goes. So what if you wanted, I'm still going to have, let's say I have 200 meg now. What if I wanted 100 meg from AT&T and 100 meg from another provider so that it's
Redundant.
but now I'm still getting 200 meg of internet. That's what I want, but it's coming from two different.
First of all, anything redundant is not eligible for E-rate, period. Period, period, period. Anything that sits idle, except when needed, is not eligible for E-rate.
Neither one of those.
Okay, well, then it's not redundant.
Okay, so but it's still coming from two different providers though.
But it would not be considered redundant. It may be considered supplemental. I would say the problem is that if they're serving the same locations that are already being served by an internet access provider, that's going to be a Macomb issue.
But if your internet service provider provides you two different circuits, that's up to them how they get you that.
Yeah, that's totally, yeah,
Okay.
that's, yeah, because you're paying one cost. That's their configuration.
We had Tornado Alley,
Yeah,
and something could be blown away here, and we need another way to get out.
Right. And again, I'm going to go back to, those are all very responsible decisions to have, some sort of alternate path. And that may be what you decide to do, but the E-rate program's not going to discount it.
Okay.
That's just, we're working with a finite resource, and this is how they are sort of managing their budget. In your contract, and this is particularly going forward, but this has been a rule for the last couple of years. I just don't know how much review there's been of it. If you're going to have a multi-year contract that you allow extensions, you have to indicate in the contract how many extensions are allowed and what term those extensions can be. For example, on a 3-year contract is fine. Automatic renewals are not okay. They are not allowed under the E-rate program. You cannot just have a contract that just automatically renews year over year. There has to be a set period of time, maximum period of time that you will be contracted with that vendor.
but it's okay if you do, let's say if you do a 3-year contract, but it's 1 year and it automatically renews the second, third year unless you take action.
Nope, it's not okay. Not okay. You have to take conscious action to renew it. So and they're really these are all the things that they're gonna just hammer on this year. Be sure to, what?
Conscious action, you just have to send them.
You both
You
have
say,
to just-
I want to renew, and you sign,
Oh, okay.
you both sign to agree to renew.
I'll tell you right now, I've got one that concerns me then, because I've got the way it's written and the way we signed, and it's an auto-renewing contract. I mean,
No good for E-rate, so you want to address that, contract terms.
Oh.
Include out clauses if you can't pay with E-rate. Try to have your C1 contracts coincide with the funding year. You may sign it in February, but make it effective July 1 and ending June 30 so that you're lined up with an E-rate year. C2 contracts, on the other hand, given the fact that you can, if you so desire, take advantage of early installation, you might want to have an effective date of April 1st and an expiration date of September 30th, following the close of the funding year. So you're actually having now 18 months to complete that project from start to finish. Any questions about this? No? It's time to eat lunch.